The sun was barely up when Max began again. His voice cut through the morning stillness, raw and relentless, every bark ricocheting off the stone wall in the far corner. Dust swirled where his paws had worn the ground bare, his tail stiff as a rod, his gaze locked on the same patch of weathered rock. Claire had walked past that wall 100 times, never giving it more than a glance. But Max never looked away. Even the breeze bending the tall weeds could not break his focus. There was something in his stance, in the sharp hitch of breath between barks, that made the air feel heavier. The kind of heaviness that tells you are standing one step away from a secret. The yard still held the cool breath of night, the soil damp beneath a light skin of dust. Slivers of early sunlight slipped between the fence and the high wall at the far end, casting angled streaks across the ground. The shelter was waking, dogs shifting in their kennels, an occasional bark breaking the morning quiet. In the far corner, Max stood where he always did, his paws pressed into a patch of bare earth worn smooth by his own pacing. His tail was straight, ears fixed forward, eyes locked on the same spot on the wall. The rhythm of his barks was steady, purposeful, not frantic, not random. Claire leaned on the gate, watching. She had worked with anxious dogs, fearful dogs, even obsessive ones. But Max was different. He wasn't driven by panic or confusion. This was something deeper. The wall was unremarkable to anyone but him, pale, uneven stones streaked with lichen, bound by old mortar, vines curling into the cracks. Beyond it was nothing she cared about. Once, curiosity had made her peek through a loose board in the back gate, and she'd seen only weeds and a few stunted trees. Yet Max treated it like the most important place in the world. She'd tried to break his focus before. A red ball rolled to his feet, a tug rope brushed against his leg, even fresh chicken from the kitchen. He would flick a glance at the offering and then snap back to the wall. That single square of stone was all that mattered. This morning, she stepped closer, boots crunching over gravel until she was standing in the shallow trench his claws had carved into the dirt. His fur vibrated faintly beneath her hand, a quiet hum of energy. His breathing was deliberate, drawing in deep through his nose and letting it out with a measured force, as if scenting something carried through the cracks. Claire's eyes scanned the wall from here. The vines weren't random. They seemed to frame one particular stone, its color just a shade different from the rest. Her gaze caught a small gap at the base where the vines parted, revealing a seam in the mortar. Max barked again, one sharp beat, then stillness. His ears twitched forward just slightly more. His nostrils flared. Claire crouched, placing her palm against the stone. It was cool, faintly damp, the rough surface rasping under her skin. For a moment there was only the hum of insects and the soft pant of Max beside her. Then it came, a faint scrape from the other side. Max's bark cut short. A deep growl rolled from his chest, not loud but low, steady. Claire's own heartbeat jumped. She pressed her ear to the wall. Nothing now, just the faint smell of moss and old rain. She stepped back, watching him. He had lowered his head, weight leaning forward, gaze locked so tightly it seemed he could see through the stone. A breeze moved across the yard, bending weeds and carrying the scent of crushed mint from somewhere near the fence. But Max didn't move. He resumed his pattern, bark, pause, as if that sound had been a signal meant for him alone. Claire knelt again at the base of the vines. The small gap was real. Cool air seemed to seep from it, almost imperceptible. Maybe wind, maybe not. She pushed one vine aside and saw a hairline crack running between two stones before disappearing under more green. She remembered the first day he arrived. Thin, alert, eyes too sharp for a dog who had just been rescued. He'd been led into the yard, and instead of exploring or sniffing, he had walked straight to this wall, to this spot, and claimed it. That memory stuck in her now. A flicker of movement in the vines caught her eye, a beetle crawling along the seam. She focused again, brushing dirt from her knee, and waited. From beyond the wall came the sound again, softer this time, but closer. A whimper, faint as breath caught on a thorn. Max's ears shot even higher. His whole body leaned into the wall. Claire froze. The yard seemed to hush around them, as if the air itself was holding still. The whimper lingered in Claire's ears long after it faded. She stayed frozen, eyes locked on Max. His tail was stiff, fur along his spine raised in a tight ridge. His breathing had changed, faster now, but shallow, his focus so intense it made her chest tighten in sympathy. She leaned in again, pressing her ear to the stone. The surface was cold and faintly damp, and her cheek brushed against the coarse edges of vine. She held her breath. Nothing, only the faint rustle of weeds beyond, moving in a wind she couldn't feel here. Max gave one short bark, not his usual rhythm. Then another, closer to a sharp warning. He looked at her just for a moment, and the silent urgency in his eyes startled her. Claire slid her fingers along the seam she had noticed earlier. The mortar crumbled slightly under her touch, dry enough to flake away in small grains. She followed the line upward, tracing where it vanished under a tangle of vines. Her nails caught on something, the edge of a loosened stone, maybe just slightly out of place. Max's body shifted restlessly. His claws scraped into the dirt, his weight rocking forward. She remembered the shelter's guidelines, no entering the overgrown property behind the wall. It was technically off-limits, and the fence was meant to keep the dogs in, not to be explored by the staff. But there was something about the way Max stood guard, the way his entire being was locked onto whatever was back there, that made the rules feel like background noise. She pressed her palm flat against the suspicious stone. It had a faint give, or maybe she imagined it. She pushed harder, listening. This time the sound came again, not a whimper but a light scraping shuffle like small paws shifting against gravel. It was directly behind the wall. Max's head shot up, his ears straining forward. He gave a low, deep sound from his throat, not quite a bark, not quite a growl, and took one half-step toward the wall, his nose almost touching the stone. Claire's skin prickled. She stepped back, scanning the yard. The other dogs were distracted, some dozing, others pacing lazily. No one else seemed aware. Her eyes returned to the wall. She crouched and tried to see through the narrow gap at its base. Too dark, only the faint smell of damp earth and something else, muskier, animal, but not Max. A sudden burst of barking from a kennel made her flinch. Max didn't react. Whatever was beyond the wall had his entire world in its grip. Claire hesitated, then decided she would need to check the other side. Even if it meant slipping out after her shift, she couldn't ignore the possibility that something or someone was trapped. She rose and glanced toward the shelter building. No one was watching. She took Max gently by the collar, coaxing him toward the water bowl. He resisted, neck muscles taut, but after a tense pause, he followed a few steps. She bent to pour more water, letting him drink, but his eyes kept darting back to the wall. When he finished, he went straight back to his post. Claire followed him. The wind had shifted, bringing a faint creak from somewhere beyond the wall, wood maybe rubbing against itself. She tried again to peer through the vines. Her fingers brushed against something smoother than stone, hidden in the greenery, a strip of old metal, rusted and pitted. She tapped it lightly, and it gave off a dull, hollow note. Max barked once, sharply, at the sound. The hollow echo confirmed it. There was space back there, not solid earth. Her mind ran through possibilities, an old shed, a hollow in the wall, maybe even an entrance sealed off years ago. But if something was alive inside, how long had it been there? And how had Max known? She looked at him again. He wasn't just reacting to the noise. He was waiting for her. Claire stood, brushing dirt from her palms, and glanced toward the far edge of the yard where a rusted gate sat chained shut. She'd noticed once that the chain wasn't actually locked, just looped through and hooked. The thought settled heavily in her mind. She could go through there, circle around, and see the other side of the wall without climbing it. But she would have to be quick and careful. Max's barking slowed to a steady, deliberate pace again. One beat, pause, one beat, pause. He didn't look away from the wall, not even as a bird startled from the vines and flew overhead. Claire stepped back, her heart thudding in her chest. She made the decision then. After her shift ended, she would return with gloves, a flashlight, and maybe a crowbar. Whatever was behind that wall, Max wanted her to find it. She bent to give him one more pat, feeling the tremor of restrained energy running through him. As she turned to leave, the sound came again. Not a scrape this time. A slow, deliberate thud, as if something or someone on the other side had moved closer to the very spot where she had been standing. The shelter yard was dark by the time Claire returned. The sun had dropped, leaving only a faint smear of orange at the horizon. The hum of the day had quieted into the layered sounds of night, crickets in the grass, the occasional rustle of leaves, the low sigh of wind against the fence. She had slipped out of the staff door with her gloves, a small flashlight, and the old crowbar from the storage shed. The chain on the far gate was just as she remembered, looped, not locked. It slid free with a faint clink. Beyond the gate, the path narrowed into a tangle of nettles and dry weeds. Her boots brushed against seed heads, releasing their faint, dusty scent. Branches leaned in overhead, their shapes shifting in the flashlight beam. The air smelled different here, more stagnant, with the faint musk of animals and the deep loam of undisturbed soil. It didn't take long to find the backside of the wall. In the dark, it looked taller, its surface even more uneven and pitted than from the yard. The vines here were thicker, twisted into knotted ropes, with old seed pods hanging like dry husks. Claire swept the light along the base. About halfway across, she saw it, a gap in the stonework near the ground, partially covered by a sheet of rusted tin wedged between vines. The edges of the tin were curled and bent, leaving a wedge of shadow large enough to fit her hand through. She crouched, pressing her ear close. For a moment, nothing, then faint, quick breaths, not hers. Her fingers tightened around the crowbar. She pried gently at the tin. The metal groaned, flaking rust. Something shuffled inside. She froze. The sound was close, no more than an arm's length beyond the opening. She could hear claws skittering briefly against stone, then a low, soft noise, not quite a growl, not quite a whine. Claire's pulse quickened. This wasn't the hollow echo of an empty shed. This was alive. She angled the flashlight into the gap, careful to keep the beam low. The light caught movement, a flicker of pale fur in the darkness. Shape shifted back out of range. She caught only the glint of eyes reflecting the light, bright for a split second before disappearing again. It was a dog, smaller than Max from the brief glimpse, thin, watching her. Claire lowered the light, not wanting to blind it. "Hey," she murmured, though she remembered Max's ritual, no direct approach, no sudden moves. She sat back on her heels. The animal didn't come forward again, but she could hear it breathing, quick and shallow. Her mind ran through questions. How long had it been here? Was it trapped? Was this why Max had been so fixated? Not a scent from long ago, but a living presence waiting on the other side. She looked at the vines again. They were thick but brittle, and the mortar between the stones crumbled under her touch. She could probably break through, but not without noise. She leaned forward again to the gap. "I'll be back," she whispered, more to herself than the animal. As she rose, something moved fast in the shadows inside, not toward her, but deeper into the space. She caught a second set of eyes, higher than the first, and then they vanished. The walk back from the wall felt longer than the approach. Claire kept replaying the glimpse she'd caught: a pale fur, thin frame, the quick, watchful glint of eyes, and then that second set, higher, unblinking. She locked the gate behind her and slipped her gear back into the shed. For the rest of the shift, she caught herself glancing toward the corner of the yard where Max kept watch. Even in the dim light of the kennels, his posture hadn't changed, alert, unmoving, tethered to the same invisible thread that connected him to whatever was beyond. By morning, she'd made her decision. If she was going to find out what was behind that wall, she needed more than a flashlight and a crowbar. She brought a coil of rope, a heavier pry bar, and a small bag of food she'd tucked into her coat pocket. She told herself it was just in case, though deep down she knew exactly who it was for. The gate chain rattled softly in her hand as she slipped it free again. The air was warmer tonight, the smell of damp leaves rising up from the ground. Moonlight filtered through the trees, turning the vines on the wall into silver lines. She found the gap quickly, crouching to study it in the better light. The tin sheet still hung loosely, but the ground around it looked different. The weeds she'd brushed aside yesterday were flattened in a small patch, as if something had been there recently. She leaned close, listening. No breathing this time, no scrape of claws, just the faint creak of vines shifting against the stone. Claire eased the food from her pocket, tearing the wrapper as quietly as she could. The scent drifted into the gap. She waited. Minutes passed. The night sounds of the yard beyond the wall, an occasional bark, the metallic clink of a water bowl felt distant here. Then, from the dark inside, the softest shift, a paw. She saw it only for a moment, thin, fur-matted, claws overgrown. As it reached toward the smell, she held her breath. It touched the tin, and the faint vibration of the metal ran through her fingers where she steadied it. A quick, sharp inhale came from inside, but the paw didn't take the food. It withdrew just as quickly, replaced by stillness. Claire's eyes swept the shadows inside, searching for movement. That's when she saw it, higher up this time. A shape, barely more than an outline, leaning forward just far enough for the moonlight to catch the edge of an ear. Before she could make sense of it, the tin shifted from the inside. Not much, just enough to tell her something was pushing back. The push from the other side jolted Claire into action. She set down the bag of food, tightened her grip on the pry bar, and eased it between the tin and the stone. The metal groaned, the sound cutting sharp in the quiet night. She froze, listening. No retreat from inside this time. Whoever, whatever was back there was still close. The vines fought her at first, but their stems were brittle. She peeled them away in long, dry strands, revealing more of the rusted sheet. The moonlight spilled over her hands, catching the dull red of the metal and the pale dust of crumbling mortar. Another push from inside, this time softer, as if testing her strength in return. Claire whispered under her breath, a steadying sound more for herself than the animal beyond. She worked the bar deeper, levering the tin outward until it gave with a sharp pop. It hung loose now, swaying slightly. The smell hit her first, a mix of stale air, damp stone, and the musky scent of an animal that had been in one place too long. She lifted the tin aside and shone the flashlight into the opening. Two eyes stared back at her from just a few feet away. They belonged to a small, light-colored dog, ribs showing under a matted coat, one ear half folded. The dog didn't move at first, just blinked slowly in the sudden light. Then it stepped forward, paws hesitant but driven by something stronger than fear. Claire reached out, palm open. The dog sniffed, and for the first time she heard a faint, hopeful whine. Behind it, a second figure shifted, larger, darker. Another dog, older, with a heavy build and a scar cutting through its muzzle. Its eyes were cautious but locked onto hers. And suddenly she understood Max's obsession. These weren't strangers to him. The way the smaller dog edged forward and the larger one stayed back told her they had been here together for a long time. Max must have known, smelled them, heard them from the moment he arrived. She slid the food toward the smaller dog. It snatched a piece and retreated, glancing at the bigger one. Claire's mind raced. If there were two, how had they survived in here, and what was this space? She adjusted the flashlight beam, angling it past them. Beyond their huddled forms, the light fell into darkness, and somewhere deeper inside came a sound she hadn't heard before. Not a bark, not a growl, a slow, dragging scrape, followed by a hollow thud, as if something heavy was shifting in the dark. Claire's hands moved before her thoughts caught up. She wedged the pry bar against the loosened stones and worked them free one by one. The mortar gave in brittle chunks, each break sending a small shower of dust into the space beyond. The smaller dog stayed close, its pale eyes fixed on her, while the larger one kept itself between her and the shadows at the back. The dragging scrape sounded again, but now she saw the truth, a length of warped wood, part of an old shed door swaying gently against the far wall in the draft. No threat, only debris shifting in the stale air. When the opening was wide enough, Claire crouched low and extended the food deeper inside. The smaller dog inched forward until its paws met the edge of the gap. She slipped one hand under its chest, lifting carefully. It was lighter than she expected, every rib pronounced under her fingers. The larger dog hesitated, its eyes darting from the gap to the smaller one in her arms. Claire set the pale dog gently outside, then crouched again, offering her hand to the big one. It stepped forward slowly, muscles tight, then stopped just at the edge. Claire kept her posture low, her voice soft, and finally, with a deep exhale, it climbed through. The air outside seemed to hit them both at once. The larger dog lifted its head, scenting the night, and for the first time, Claire saw its tail give the smallest, tentative wag. From across the yard came the sound she'd been waiting for, Max's bark. Not the sharp, deliberate rhythm she'd heard for days, but a fast, eager call. Claire turned to see him pressed against the fence, eyes locked on the newcomers. She led them toward the gate, the smaller dog trotting now, the larger staying close at her side. The moment Max saw them step into the yard, he broke into a run. His paws hit the dirt hard, and in seconds he was nose to nose with the pale dog, both of them whimpering and sniffing in frantic bursts. The larger dog approached more slowly, but when Max turned to it, there was no hesitation, just a firm press of heads, a silent greeting that spoke of recognition and relief. Claire stood back, letting them have the moment. The three of them moved together now, circling, checking, touching noses, as if mapping each other all over again. She felt the tight knot in her chest finally loosen. Max hadn't been guarding the wall out of habit. He'd been calling them home. She glanced once more at the gap in the wall, vines swaying lightly where she'd cleared them. The space beyond was still dark, still broken, but it no longer held them. As the three dogs settled together in the patch of bare earth Max had claimed, Claire thought about how many times she'd tried to pull him away, how many times he'd refused. Persistence, she realized, can sound a lot like stubbornness until you see what it's been holding onto.
Dogs truly are the most loyal companions in our lives. What did you think of this heartwarming story? Let us know in the comments. Like the video and share it with your friends. Subscribe to our channel for daily emotional dog stories. Turn on notifications so you never miss an update. Click here to watch the next story of love, loyalty, and the incredible bond we share with our paw-some friends.